Well, the most striking comment that Arundhati makes in her book and in her presentation, I think, is that we may be witnessing democracy's endgame. That sounds kind of apocalyptic, but it's not an unusual statement, in fact. In fact, one hears things pretty much like that right in the mainstream. So, for example, the chief financial officer of the Bank of England, who's in charge of financial stability, says that the financial system is entering into what he calls a doom loop. We're just going to keep getting worse and worse crises. There's nothing we can do about it. Former chief economist of the IMF, who's Sloan School here, Simon Johnson, describes it as a doomsday cycle. There's and I won't go into the details, but what's considered the current major threat, Iran. The fact of the matter is very few people know the facts, and you can't find them out without a research project. And the facts are very ugly and serious. And that, again, is an institutional fact, has to do with the principal architects of power and their control over the institutions in which we exist. So talking about democracy's endgame is by no means an outlandish idea. We're kind of living it for reasons which are inherent in the institutions in which we're embedded.
I just wanted to read something from an earlier book of Arundhati Roy's. I won't read the whole thing to you. I realized that for Noam Chomsky, though this was in the chapter, The Loneliness of Noam Chomsky.
I feel very lonely.
I realize that for Noam Chomsky, a US citizen, to criticize his own government is better manners than for someone like myself, an Indian citizen, to criticize the US government. I'm no patriot, am fully aware that venality, brutality, and hypocrisy are imprinted on the leaden soul of every state. But when a country ceases to be merely a country and becomes an empire, then the scale of operations changes dramatically. So may I clarify that I speak as a subject of the US empire. I speak as a slave who presumes to criticize her king. Arundhati, would you say that about Obama's America?
Certainly, yes. I think that, it's easy to forget here that Obama has actually expanded the war in Afghanistan. And the effects of that are so imminent on us, on Pakistan, on India. It's as if somebody's just blundering into a sea which he simply doesn't understand. Nobody even understands the meaning of the word Taliban. What does it mean? You're fighting the Taliban and you're keeping on dropping bombs on people as though Taliban is a limited number of people with Taliban tattooed on their forearm. It's an ideology. You're just creating more and more unrest, more and more people there who and the ripples just spread further and further out. So to us, Obama has not done anything different from Bush in terms of foreign policy.
Did you have hopes that he would in the movement that swept him into office?
Well, I actually had quite a lot of trouble with myself at that time because I really wanted to be happy. I didn't want to be someone who was incapable of any kind of hope or any kind of happiness. So I was like popping these happiness pills and trying to force myself to think that surely something can happen and something will change. And I have to admit that I was moved by the sight of so many people who had lived through the civil rights movement here and the tears in the eyes of black folks who had lived through the worst kinds of discrimination. To see somebody like Obama in office, I don't think one should detract from the symbolic value of that. However, when I saw those same tears cut and paste into the eyes of powerful white people watching that acceptance speech of the Nobel Prize, where you're winning a peace prize and you're justifying war, it was very hard to take.
No, President Obama's foreign policy, if very quickly you can just enumerate it for us and give your analysis.
3 words. George W. Bush. It's essentially, as was in fact pretty well predicted, it's an extension of Bush's second term. The first term was off the spectrum.